My college draft is proud to announce my conference called Educate You. Educate You core areas will cover recruitment, retention, and how to build a strong alumni base of underrepresented and first-generation college students. Welcome to another edition of the Educate You podcast, being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. We have a wonderful show for you today. Today's title is Life After the Verdict. I know everybody got a lot to say about that, but what I'm proud to say is we have Dr. Deams. I'm saying the lady with more credentials than I've ever seen in my life. Dr. Deams.
Good morning.
Tell the people about you, ma'am.
Well, I am originally from Southeast Louisiana, Napoleonville to be exact. I currently reside in Smyrna, Tennessee, which has been my home for almost about 18 years. My journey was I undergrad at Southern University and A&M College, which was my first HBCU love. And then from Southern University to University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and then on to Tennessee State University for my doctorate in counseling psychology. And then I have to shout out that Tennessee State is one of only 2 HBCUs to have a fully APA accredited program in counseling psychology, which was my route. I call myself an HBCU enthusiast and advocate. And in that, I have worked at 4 HBCUs, including Tennessee State, while I was in graduate school. From there, I also was at Grambling State University for 2 years as a department head of psychology and sociology, and then on the Talladega College for 4 years as their department chair of psychology. And then I'm currently at Kentucky State University, where I came in as Dean of Students, and now I currently serve as Interim Vice President for Student Engagement and Campus Life. I'm a mother of 4. My husband is also at an HBCU. He is the registrar at Tennessee State University.
Bro, you wasn't lying. I mean, credentials out the wazoo. I was trying to figure out what letter she did not get.
And she's affiliated with every HBCU that I could think of. They need to sponsor everything you do. You represent HBCU so well. I gotta applaud you. I have to applaud you 100%. Now, before we jump into the topic of life after the verdict, I want to know what it was like going to these HBCUs, leaving home, going to Southern, ultimately transitioning to Tennessee State. Talk to us about that.
So going to Southern was very, very easy. I'm a second generation HBCU alum. My daughter actually is third generation. She's at Xavier right now in Louisiana. But my mom and dad were both educators. And then my oldest sister is actually 10 years older than me. She stepped on the foot of Southern University first. And so I was always around as a little girl and just fell in love with the campus. Just from my dad talking about it to being there as a little girl. And then, when I was in high school, I only applied to one college. That was the only option for me. People was like, well, why don't you do a couple more and just see. My best friend went to Dillard. She went to a different school. She's like, just try it. I was like, no, this is where I'm going. And I actually, Southern has so many opportunities because I actually went to a pre-college program between 11th and 12th grade and received 10 credits. And then, after high school, small town, I just asked my parents, can I just go to school? So when everybody else was coming in as a freshman, I was coming in with 20 credits because, I went to summer school. And then I went to summer school every summer after that, and I actually finished college in 3 years at 20 with a double major.
So now she just gloating. Now she gloating, y'all. Okay.
I told you.
We got 5 minutes into the conversation. Now she gloating like, yeah. I saved the world at 16.
But I have to throw it out there because it was the mentors, the advisors. I had one who was like, you might want to slow down and double major because you're going to finish in 2 years and you won't enjoy the experience. So that's part of why I did choose to double major. But I had so many opportunities to do research and to be in organizations and just the preparation to go on to grad school. That's why I brag about Southern so much because I got so much from that experience. And so that put me at University of Southern Mississippi for my master's, which I just was trying to stay close to home, didn't realize that they had a reputation at their time. And I think it was for about 10 years for being the #1 program in counseling psych. So I was just trying to go, I didn't realize what Southern prepared me for that next step. And then when I got to Tennessee State and realized they were the second HBCU to be fully APA accredited in counseling psych, you know, it's like you do your research, but then you stumble on greatness at these HBCUs. And that's what, you know, some of our students, they do the research and they do the background and they know, but some of them, they come in and they stumble on that greatness. And that's part of what I stumbled on, because being at Tennessee State allowed me to do all of my clinical training at Vanderbilt. I did 2 years of clinical training at Vanderbilt University. I did my assessments at Vanderbilt, and it just, you know, they were looking for the TSU students because they knew how we were trained.
That's awesome.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Please.
The fruit is only as good as the soil it comes from. The fruit is only as good as the soil it comes from. And so you hear her talking about the mentorship, the family, the genealogy, the legacy, the community. So that soil, that foundation is key. And so I'm just grateful that she had a strong foundation and a testimony to tell her story today. So
that's why she's here, man.
I'm inspired already. Y'all got me locked in. Here we go.
And I would say that my favorite mentor at Southern, Dr. Reginald Rackley, you know, his background, he did his undergrad at Dillard, his master's at FAMU, his doctorate at Howard, and now he's at Southern. He's been at Southern for over 20 years because he was there, you know, during my time. It was there before me. But when you talk about the soil and the fruit, you know, is being nurtured by those kind of people.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Again, you listen to the Educate You podcast being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. I will be your facilitator for the day, but always we got my homeboys with me. We have Dr. Ricky Frierson, who serves as our resident scholar. And we have Mr. David Hartman, who is, man, I can't even stress it enough. Every artist that you can ever imagine rolled up into one Black Tootsie Roll. And Dr. Deams, who already has graced us with so much wisdom. We are honored. We're so honored. Today's topic is life after the verdict. So this is in the news. I'm just gonna put it out there. What do y'all think before we jump in? We're gonna go ladies first, David, and then Dr. Frierson.
So I think if you're talking after the verdict, I think you're going from I can't breathe to now I'm purposely holding my breath. And I say that because there's still the sentencing that we're waiting on. There's still the reform that we're waiting on. There's still the social programming that we're waiting on. There's still the community uplift that we're waiting on. So there's still, you know, you can't breathe because, you know, metaphorically, something's on your neck, but at the same time, you're holding your breath because now you're waiting to see what's going to happen and where do we go from here? And then how do we backtrack on all the other cases that we didn't get a guilty on, but then we still trying to thrive and figure it out, the process through it. And then the numbing effect of, you know, you're so used to it. You know, I didn't have my screen on. I think my daughter texted me, you know, at the verdict, but you're so used to it going a different way that, you know, now you're holding your breath like for the what now? So what's next?
Ditto. I mean, I've been having a lot of conversations around, you know, topics, period, of diversity and inclusion, period. But at the end of the day, I always tell everybody, like, it's great to have these conversations and to maybe get one win, but we still have to live in this, and we still got to figure out how to maneuver in this. And every time something like this comes up, I think about my two boys and trying to raise them up in this environment so they could also be safe but be successful. So yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, after the verdict, still what's next? Where is a real hope going to be? or is this just smoke and mirrors?
Yes, agree with both comments, and I'll kind of expound a little bit more on nervousness and the standpoint of this. Society cannot, well, there's two things. Number one, society cannot deem this as the eternal win and then have the majority of society go back to work and say, see, minority folks, we've got it fixed. You got your win and we're done. And then you go back to your workspace and it's status quo again. We cannot let the majority off the hook in understanding that this is a long-standing issue. And we can't let ourselves off the hook either. I'll just make that plain as well. But on the top of that, one thing that I've been really wrestling with that I want to change for my kids' education. When David talked about his boys, I think about my three kids. I feel like we were fed a lie in education. In the standpoint of this, we were taught that civil rights era and fighting for equality was history. History is when something is done and in the past. This is very much a current issue that has been perpetuated for decades. We haven't completed the ultimate goal, thus I can't call it history. And so when I looked at those pictures in black and white, I used to be like, oh wow, that was something that happened in the 50s and the 60s, and it's still happening today. And I think we need to make that slight ideological change in the textbooks to let people know this is a current issue that has been going on for a long time. And so you cannot, if we put it in the confines or under the categories of history, I think it allows people to be complacent, majority and minority alike, right? To be complacent to these things, saying, well, that's something that has been resolved because you got this case. Because we have to remember, 1 hour earlier, a young lady was shot in Ohio. And I don't know the full details of that case yet, but it lets you know that there's, it's two sides of the same coin. We try to fight for justice and injustice happens at the same time. And I find it hard pressed to people don't see the statistics of the disproportionate rate of minorities, specifically African Americans, who, when having police encounters, minimal, severe, minor, ends up getting killed. No questions asked. It's shoot first and then figure out what happened later. And so there's a lot of things that I'm nervous about as far as, okay, if we get this win, and Dr. Deams said it perfectly, the sentencing, he gets 3 months and walks out, we're back to square zero. If it's a maximum of 40 and they say time served for 1.5 years, we're back square to zero. And I do think that this is an interesting conversation because I did read an article last night about how a lot of police stations are now under a lot of, they're stressing out because what does this mean for them? And I'm like, well, that's good because now there's accountability, which is what we've been asking for this whole time. So it's not that we're saying all police are bad. I want to make that very clear on this podcast before we get hate mail. We're not saying all police are bad and all this stuff, but we are saying that there are bad ones, and the encounter of us having bad police with minorities is significantly higher than other people's interactions.
Again, you listen to the Educate You podcast brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. Today's topic is life after the verdict. And that's not to demean any other case, the Breonna Taylors, the cases that been going on that are kind of undermined, but it's this one that kind of like just put the world on edge. So Dr. Deams, the HBCUs were birthed out of the knee bend on the Blacks' necks for a long time. How does the HBCUs kind of like champion the cause right now? Like what's the mindset of the HBCUs as we go through this verdict?
I think it's a great space for championing the cause. And one, you have the students are so bright. They have such strong voices. They come in with a social justice framework already, a lot of them. I struggled with, my daughter, who is a student at an HBCU, wanting to go out and protest. And I struggled as a mom because I need to make sure you get home. It's not so much that your heart and spirit is to, use your voice, but I don't know who else is in the crowd. I don't know who else is planted there. I don't know the intentions of everyone else, because everybody that's there and out there is not going to look for justice. Some are purposefully going to do negative things, and plant it in the crowd. And so that the spirit that our students have, they're coming and asking for things. Like, for example, at KSU, I have a group of students in an organization, Lead 1886, and last summer, they did a whole series called It's Getting Hot in Here, and they're dealing with the social climate at the same time as dealing with, we're dealing with dual pandemics, because you're dealing with this racial injustice as well as COVID. And then you want to protest, but then you're scared to catch COVID. So, how can you scream with a mask on? So all of these different energies that they have, also, KSU, they started a woke task force, which the woke stands for wisdom, opportunities, knowledge, and empowerment. And it was student-led and student-driven, the same as the one that my student group ran. And it's because of their energy, their voice. They want to be out. They want to see change. They're ready, and you kind of want to, keep your arms around them a little bit, just because of that extra piece of protection. But the HBCUs are a great space for just even for conversations to be had. Let's talk in these classrooms about the parallels of what's going on right now. And just like you said, which, civil rights is not that long ago. I even tell people, like, Ruby Bridges is just 64, so that stuff is not that long ago. And it gives them such a great space to, as they grow as leaders, to have those forums, have those conversations in their professional career and development, to make sure that their voices are heard even in corporate, to make sure that as they become teachers, and even going back into their own communities, to help ignite people to vote, to help ignite people to get out and get more involved. And even going back and sitting at the feet of elders. There's so much you can learn from, as you're learning in college and in your institution, but going back and hearing what was the experience of the grandparents and the great grandparents, and how that impacts what we're looking at now. I think about when my parents were in school, in college, and different things were going on, the lunch counter sit-ins and all of that. We're kind of in the same place. It just looks a little different. And there are more cameras. The cameras are better. So the revolution is really being televised, because, they were dealing with the same things, but now you can see what was happening a little bit more versus just the black and whites. It's in full color in front of your face. But the HBCU is a great space to even just have a conversation in class, sitting down in the yard and talking about, how do you feel, and processing that there are different levels of thought in this. Some people want to protest and some don't. And so just hearing the perspectives of the why in a safe place, is a critical moment.
Dr. Frierson, you deal with basically setting the atmosphere, right, of conversation, discussion. How do you bring, after this verdict, how do you bring different sides together? How do you create an atmosphere where people can actually sit down and talk?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, the main thing is, first of all, you have to, if you're trying to create an atmosphere after this situation, and you haven't created an atmosphere beforehand so that people are prepared and comfortable, because the biggest thing that I've learned, and with my faculty and staff and institutions I've been at, you have to teach people how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad, right? Just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean that the person doesn't have purpose and intent or passion to find resolution. Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean we should stop and switch up the verbiage so you can feel appeased to not feel a certain type of guilt one way or the other. And so I think when you're setting up the atmosphere, we have to ask, what is, I always lead with this. Don't lead with opinion, lead with fact. And number one is this: is anyone in here thinking that the video that we saw of this man being killed was not wrong? It's going to be very hard for someone to be like, no, because that's fact. So given that the fact that people think is wrong, what is the discourse or the dialogue that is being had around the conversation around this verdict? That's where I would set the foundation, because if it's not wrong what we saw, and that people think, I mean, if people think it is wrong, but then there's this kind of animosity, tension around the verdict, why is that? And so then that allows individuals to be opened up to understand perspectives, lived experiences, historical situations that have happened to certain demographics or ethnicities, experiences or lack thereof of opportunities here in America that's afforded to some people. Remember, I don't know if it was one of our podcasts or another show I was doing, but you know, I had to do a presentation about policing, and I was on a panel with a chief of police, and I said, well, you know, wealthy communities and majority communities, it seems as if that wealthy and majority communities get protected, middle class gets patrolled, and then certain ethnic groups, minorities, and low class neighborhoods get policed. And there's a difference between policing, patrolling, and protecting. And I said the motto says to protect and serve, but what about those who are being policed and patrolled? How is that being looked at? And so, you know, those are the kind of things that we have to set up as far as open questions that allow people to understand the experience of someone else's lived experience, the understand the perspective and the impact on why someone can't come to work or goes to work with tension, because then knowing you're the only minority or whatever in the classroom or in the office space, and your colleagues not recognizing the impact that this verdict, that this conversation around the verdict, the trial, the video, etc., has on your everyday experience, compared to what those who might be your colleagues, they don't have to experience that coming into the workspace, and how that impacts your focus, your productivity, research agendas, mentorship, all that. So that's how I would set up the conversation.
David, from the perspective of student organizations, what can student organizations gain from this? Where can they go from this? Because I know you do a lot with student organizations.
I think a lot of it goes back to what Ricky was talking about, but starting to have that conversation early, so it's something that you have throughout the year. And that's one of the things that we try to do, is make sure that we're having that conversation throughout the year, not only for people to be educated, but for us to also have those conversations. One of the ways we've been able to do that is through like book clubs and stuff. So picking a diversity book, and we go through that book and we talk about the chapters, and then people are able to give those lived experiences, as Ricky was talking about, which hopefully creates some type of empathy, and they can begin to see life through someone else's eyes, and just creating a space that is open, that is going to be uncomfortable, right? But letting everybody knowing that this is an opportunity for you to learn and grow. Now, everybody isn't going to want to grow in that space as well. We've experienced some of that too. But we still provide that space and opportunity for people to be able to talk, to be able to try to get a deeper understanding of what's going on. What are some of the obstacles and stereotypes that we have to face, and then how we have to deal with those things. And just we're talking about police, right? So some of my colleagues are like, oh yeah, they're here to protect me and that type of deal. But I have to explain to them, I've been pulled over for driving while black several times, and being told, hey, people in this type of car sell drugs, right? I ain't never did that a day in my life. So those different types of things, or we go a little deeper of how my heart rate goes crazy if I'm getting pulled over. And then I'm also consciously thinking, okay, I have to stay calm. My hands have to be visible. I'm very conscious on where my driver's license and everything is when I get into the car. Like those conversations that you have to have and think about that everyone else doesn't really have to think about. So those different types of things, so they can understand what the experience is, and not just what the bigger picture is. Let's break it down a little bit more so you can understand what people are feeling, and maybe you can empathize a little bit more with them.
I like it. Are you tired of all the emails and phone calls from colleges that you never even heard of? Sign up to where'smydocs.com and only work with the colleges that you choose. Where'smydocs.com, where college recruitment is made simple. Now, there was a period in time where when Booker T. Washington was younger, slavery was about ended, and he pretty much had to tell the people that they're no longer slaves, but they didn't know what to do. They still function as slaves. So I'm gonna start with Dr. Deams. How do you change the mindset of the people that once the knee is lifted from their necks, how do we change the mindset that they really are free?
Yeah, that that's a tough one. And in that, are the knees really moved from the necks? I think one thing that they, we as a people did carry out of slavery was a sense of healthy paranoia, because it leads to kind of what David was mentioning about knowing where my license is and where my insurance is, and knowing where things are, and knowing to watch your environment a little bit more because of that mental piece. Now, I try not to talk about, I don't like talking about African Americans from a deficiency model, a deficiency perspective, but in that, when you go to there is sometimes a breaking that needs to happen, and it may take a couple of generations to learn to trust the system and learn to trust, the community. System wasn't necessarily built for us, and so it's hard to relax a little bit in that. My daughter, she actually pulled me to the side, because we was talking about all the stuff that was going on to the summer right after George Floyd was killed. And, I have 2 daughters and 2 sons, and I was just talking about raising sons, and she was like, Mom, she said, women get it just as much. Look at Breonna Taylor. Look at now this new case, with this young lady and others, and the whole Say Her Name campaign. So as you're trying to process, we try to teach our sons, make sure you get a receipt, make sure you don't wear a hoodie, make sure you look people in the eye, make sure you don't, I even tell my kids, like, don't touch your pockets, when you're in the store, so it doesn't look like you're doing something. But at the same time, we got to protect the girls as much as we have to protect the boys. So it's a whole kind of shifting process from a psychological standpoint. But I think that healthy paranoia kind of helps a little bit to try to figure out how to move through a system that wasn't necessarily created for you, and also how to survive, like I say, how to get back home. It's some things where even something as simple as, I know some people who they say their family don't hug and kiss, and part of it is because you couldn't love because you didn't know when somebody was going to be separated and pulled apart. And I think that stuff is still in some generations because of that reason. I know people who say their grandparents never said, I loved you. It's because they're just 2 or 3 generations removed from when you couldn't, because if you bonded too much and that child is ripped away from you, you're left with a void and a loss. And so it's kind of like things are clashing together as you asking me that, because I'm trying to process how to move forward. But at the same time, I need a little bit of caution, to be able to move and navigate through, working these systems and working the community, working, the spaces that I'm in. And I
would add to that.
Jack that up a little bit more than what you were looking for. But
No, I think that's good, Dr. Deems. And I would add for more of the, like you said, not going from a deficit, but more of an achievement perspective. I think that's one of the greatest tricks is that, we don't recognize how much we've achieved. We're the only culture in American history that was forced over to America and had to create something out of nothing. The only culture. Everyone else voluntarily migrated or what, we were forced. I mean, physically taken out and came over, right? And the system, like Dr. Dean says, the policies, I mean, you think about the creation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all this, we were 3/5 of it, man. And through it all, historically, our culture, our people, we have found a way to adjust, to adapt, and to survive and to achieve. And so there's a lot that we do. And I know that what makes me hopeful is this. We, like Dr. Dean, like I think you started off saying this, we've always had the knee on the neck, right? And it was just that this was a visual depiction of it that everybody got to see finally, but we've always had that happen. And so now what it is, one of the things that I think that needs to be looked at is how do we start to become more insular like we were? Because every time there's been pockets, Tulsa, in Louisiana, in Memphis, in East St. Louis, shout out to East St. Louis sometimes. But anyway, all these places, there was pockets where there was insular success, community development, and it was a threat. Every single time there's been a development and unity of community amongst the African American people, it's been deemed a threat. Even with the Black Panther, that was deemed a threat. I mean, Black Panther was considered a domestic terrorist group before the KKK. I don't even think to this day the KKK still is. I think they might have just got on the list. I mean, like, welcome to the club. And you know what I'm saying? Like, and so we have to be mindful that just as much as we talk about what's been against us, look at our history decrees for over 400 years, how much we've achieved in spite of. And so this is a step to where we're saying, like, look, we got it on video. We're trying to tell the American people we wasn't lying back in the 1920s, 50s, 1860s, 1770s, all that. We were trying to tell you how you're mistreating us. And I honestly believe we have to realize that we are one of the main keys to societal success. The amount of worth that we have collectively as a African-American people is in the billions, dang near trillions. I mean, we circulate a lot because we like our fashion, we like our stuff, you know what I'm saying? So but think about it. For us to be despised so much of our culture is adapted to mainstream, but they hate us so much. But you know what I'm saying? And so there's so much that we need to look at as far as like, okay, you might not like how we're doing this police thing, but I guarantee you, once we figure out how to take hold of it and adapt the policies, people are gonna be like, yeah, this is the best way to police. And it's like, oh, yeah, we knew that. So sorry, I went on the tangent there. Edit that part out, David.
That was all good.
All of it stays in there. All of it stays in there. They gotta get all that energy. Another thing, just to add to it, and I think Ricky touched on it, is worth, right? And I know we've hinted at it and talked a lot about slavery and civil rights and all that kind of stuff, but we're so much more than just that, right? So I would encourage everybody to try to figure out, I know there's obstacles, but figure out where you come from, where are your roots, what are family traditions, and then also look at all of the things that we've achieved, as Ricky was mentioning. Man, there's so much, we have so much power, education, the whole gamut, but the value in yourself and also your fellow man. I think we talked about that before a little bit on another podcast, but understanding what our value is in valuing each other.
I like it. Again, you listen to the Educate You podcast, being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. Today's topic is life after the verdict. Dr. Deans, you said something that it struck a nerve. It was good too, because you talked about how in the days of slavery, how there couldn't be much bond, couldn't be much love, and so now carry forth, there's not a lot of affection amongst the people, and I'm like, no. So then is that the derivative of some sort of the crab in a bucket, right? So this is what I want you guys to do. Put on your consultant hats, and because I know everybody's a consultant here. What I want is, how do you get the higher ed institutions, our community, the economics in the community, how you get us to culminate and work together through this process. Because ultimately, in addition to the atmosphere, in addition to the direct personal development, there's another part of where we got to be very strategic. So everybody, your consulting hats, we're going to start with Dr. Deams first. We're going to go David and then Dr. Frierson.
Repeat the question real quick so I remember what you said. You asked like 3 questions.
I know, you got to flow. You already know that. So everybody put on your consulting hats. I'll go backwards. And then I want to figure out how to bring our higher ed institutions, bring our community, our economics. I'm talking about us, right? Those of us who got all the knees on the necks for years. I want us to, how do we come together? Because now it's time to put these strategies together. Because I remember when I was in college, it used to be the community and the college used to fight like riots. But at this time, we got to figure out how to work together. And so as a consultant, tell the people how that can happen.
So I think the first piece you mentioned, you said the crab in the barrel kind of analogy. And I like that one to break it apart because, you know, the barrel is not the crab's natural environment. And so they're pulling, and it seems like the one that's going up, they're pulling down. But when the crab is in a natural environment, they walk in a line. And so, you know, if you get in an environment that you're supposed to be in, we're going to walk together alignment. So we get out of the mental barrel and walk together in line, you're going to see that change you're looking for. You know, one of the things I'm working with a professor in business about a incubator system. So, you know, the students who do the lashes, who do hair, who you know, do fashion, that they can connect with the people to help them get a legitimate LLC so that, you know, hey, I'm coming to school for business, but when I walk out, I have a legitimate business as well. And so making sure we're actually connecting back into that community, but also those, you know, those gifts and the things that we can get from each other. I think we have to open ourselves up to that. Just like you say, most of the time when the HBCU is in the middle of a community, it is doing something to benefit and help that community. And one of the things I always push, you know, I think they do it really well from what I understand at Jackson State is if everybody registered to vote where you're going to school, that institution literally could carry the local elections. So you can you could be a senior at, you know, whatever school, Kentucky State, but you could also be on the school board, you know, because if the 2,000 students are registered in that town where we go to school, we determine who's the mayor, who's the city council. So when you start having influence at those levels, you get it at the state and at the representative, and you get your voice out there. But again, that whole piece about getting back out in the community and really getting in a real environment, which is the alignment versus being in a barrel, that's where we need to get to. I don't know if I answered what you're looking for, but my point is we're mentally, and you got to get out the barrel, you got to get out the box. And if you get where you truly are supposed to be and get in that alignment, you're going to be where you're supposed to be.
That was good. Dave, I'm sorry, you got to follow that.
No, hold on before you, because I got to be on air and be recorded when I say this. I'm still on that, Dr. Deams. I'm going to be saying that in the next session within the next 2 weeks. I want to say that analogy. I'm just saying. So I just want to make sure it's on the record that I'm giving credit to Dr. Deams now because I'm straight up taking that twice.
Well, I got it. I got it from. I don't know if I got it from somewhere else or reading it or something when somebody mentioned that. But it's like, you know, that's how they are when they're caught. One is trying to get up, another one is trying to pull, and they're actually probably pulling to protect, and it comes off as, you know, holding you back. And so I think really, if you lock, you can probably all get out. But we don't know how to align when we're in that barrel, when we're in slavery, when we're in, you know, dealing with injustice, when we're boxed into violence, when we boxed into, negativity. We box into prejudice and discrimination. When we get boxed into this kind of stuff, it breaks off the alignment.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow this. No, I totally agree. I know one of the things, and I'm at a community college now, but that's one of the things that the community college focuses on is what does the community need and how can we service the community to try to build those businesses that are needed in the community. So yeah, that's one of the parts. But I feel like there has to be something that's written down. We have to have a plan to make this work. And I always tell my people, it's easier to hit a target when you can see it. If we don't have anything written down, if we don't have a plan to get to that goal, we're going to have, 10 different people going in 10 different directions. So getting everybody on the same page to be able to move forward, I think is probably the first thing that needs to happen. Because, we can all be opinionated and have different goals, and everybody has their own personal agendas and everything else. So creating what that list looks like, we're going to do this first, this second, this third, and then start attacking those tasks as a group and as a collective, moving forward towards those goals.
And I want to just add to what you're saying. I also, my first was in the community college as well, before going back into the HBCU space. But one of the parallels that my pastor uses for even the church is you want to be so infused in that community that if the church closes down or if the institution closes down, the community hurts. And that you want to be there in the middle of the education system, you want to be in the middle of the social programming, you want to be in the middle of all of volunteerism, you want to be in there so infused that, if you were to be missing, it would really impact that community.
Yeah, I think to wrap up and kind of summarize a little bit of what both are saying and kind of add my own spin to it, I think the first thing is, I work at a predominantly white institution, and a lot of times predominantly white institutions, PWIs, have the mindset of we want to work with minority or underserved communities and things like this, and this is what we want to do. And so I tell my units and division, look, we can't be going out trying to build bridges and then expecting people to come when they weren't a part of the co-construction of the bridge. You need to be in partnership, collaboration with these communities to understand who they are. So before you can build a bridge, you need to go to the community that you want to build a bridge to, kind of like what David's saying, know the vision, go to the community you want to build a bridge to, know what they want so that the construction of the bridge is built for both people's safety in mind, and then you walk back across the bridge. But if you just build a bridge, you think about your community. If someone just built a bridge and you have no idea where it's going, we ain't crossing that bridge. We just talked about the knee on the neck. We ain't about to just, that ain't us. We follow that different creed. Cedric Entertainer said that a long time ago. We got a different creed. We just don't go down a bridge we don't know where it's ended to, right? And so that's number one, is that we need to have co-construction. Number two, I think that goes back into when you talk about writing it down, we need to revisit a lot of these policies that have been racist in this formation. And so it needs to be a revisionist understanding of the policies that have been constructed in organizations, in community organizations, corporations, by having this partnership with these underserved communities, number one. Number two, when we think about higher ed, I think it'd be really good, when we talk about the economic piece, most of these state institutions, I work at a state institution, most of these state institutions and flagship institutions were built by slaves. And so if you really want to honor and try to figure out how to give back, then my whole thought process is, this is me, you need to make sure that your minority students that come through this program have debt-free student loans. So that way they're not strapped down financially in addition to trying to get a job. They're more free to get the job and serve in the communities that they want to go back to. Now it's not about, I got to make a certain amount because my bills or my loan is so high. So that'd be another way to equalize the economical deficiencies that are occurring within our segments, is because you have all this money, you have all this stuff that you built off of the backs of slaves, you've stolen the land from indigenous tribes. And so if we're going to talk about really setting it equal and reparations, forgive my student loans. So I can go out here and really give money back to my communities the way I want to, because, you're talking about how much you care about me and so on and so forth. But then I got to cut a check for $1,700 to the government every month on top of that, when I can be giving that to the community, I can be doing a startup investment. I can pull money together to start a bank or whatever, or give a scholarship out to my youth and have that go forward. And so I think those are ways to stimulate the economy, help individuals in the minority community, co-construction of understanding, and then revisiting the policies that really dictate how people operate, because then people utilize this, well, we're just following tradition and law. And quite frankly, my response anytime someone says, well, this is the law, these are the rules, so on and so forth, is that, well, you know, back in a few decades ago, it was law that I was supposed to be a slave. Just because it's a law doesn't mean it's right. Just because this was the rule doesn't mean it's effective. Just because that was tradition doesn't mean it's sustainable. And so we need to look at these aspects and really, you know, speak truth to power and make these fundamental changes that could really be equitable and advancing for all individuals going forward.
Okay, Dr. Frierson, I like it. So I'm gonna try this new segment called Saturday Salute. And so don't laugh, David. Don't you laugh. Don't you laugh. I want to give a Saturday salute to Kentucky State. So Dr. Deams, talk a little bit about Kentucky State.
Okay. So Kentucky State is the only public HBCU in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We have some awesome programs, including one of the unique programs is a program in aquaculture. We harvest, you know, shrimp on campus at one of the farms. Kentucky State, it really is it's in the capital city in Frankfurt, really quiet area, but you know, it's so rich. And we have a fermentation program as well, because you know Kentucky is known for bourbon. Our mascot is the thoroughbred. You know, Kentucky is known for horses. So we have like those key pieces and features. Our current president is 18th president, M. Christopher Brown II. Awesome leader, awesome scholar. And there's just so much, I believe, for the students. We draw a lot of students in from neighboring inner city areas like Detroit, Gary, Indiana, Chicago. That's where a lot of our students come in. And then of course from the Louisville area. We draw in a lot of students from those areas, and they come in with so much, when I tell you so much richness, so much creativity. They're designing and making clothes on campus. They, you know, they speak, you know, the inner, the leadership that's already there that they come with is so rich. They are activists, they're entertainers, they are scholars, you know, and that's the beauty of what you have in, even in the rivalry. Our biggest rival is Central State, and one of my good friends is the provost there, Dr. Eric Brooks. And even in a rivalry, there's so much, you know, friendship and compassion, and you know, such a balance in those experiences. And so I think one of the things that I loved was listening, actually was facilitating area where Dr. Brown was speaking on, and he talked about this indigenous knowledge that African Americans have. And when you talk about just things like being able to, you know, do a recipe without writing it down. And I remember when he mentioned it took me back to somebody asked me how to make macaroni and cheese. And I was like, well, you gotta do it when you got this much cheese and this much milk, and I do it by eye. And I didn't realize that was that, you know, indigenous knowledge that we share. I don't even think the person ever got the recipe right, because, you know, it's you bring in all of that from your background and your culture, you share it, and then we get back together and it's this melting pot of knowledge. And I think, you know, there's some awesome history at Kentucky State. You know, it's an awesome area, and just the collaboration that you have in the students and in that experience. You know, I learn every day. And I love that I've shifted there into the student affairs side, but I learn every day. I'm sitting there listening to the students, and I'm literally learning every day. So
That's awesome. I just want to do a quick little test. Does anybody on this podcast know your school song? I'm just curious. besides Dr.
Wait a minute,
Dean?
wait a minute. Hold on. Question, because
So I
that's
have so many schools, so I'm not
yeah,
with that. So I don't know what you call in the school. So
exactly. I was like, are you
I'm
saying
not
like the
gonna
school
mess
we
with
work for, the school we graduated from, the school that we have, we call an alumni? What are you deeming as knowing the school song?
First of all, you can see why Dr. Frierson is our resident scholar. You got a million questions. Look, the school, the school that you went to, your your alma mater. I don't know not one word.
I know ours.
Dang,
Yeah,
you
I
know
know.
yours?
Yeah.
But I had a good time at my
Oh,
institution.
okay. First of
So,
all, I'm just curious.
I know mine only because we had to sing it after every home football game.
Dang, I'm the only
and
one
I'm gonna just cheat. I'm gonna just cheat and say my favorite song is "I'm So Glad I Went To" because you can put anything behind it.
Ah,
So I'm so glad I went to SU, TSU, KSU. I'm gonna leave it at
I'll leave
that.
it at that. Ricky, what's the first line of your song?
fight.
David, I don't know not one word. I think I hated my school. I hated my school. Now, before we transition, because we coming to a close, Dr. Deans, you gotta give us one ooh ooh. Just give it to us.
Good
Rick,
deal.
give me an 06, brother. As we
Man,
close.
look, you gotta give it the 06. When I got these kids in here, they're gonna think they in trouble if I start yelling. They're gonna be like, what? Daddy gonna come down with the belt. One, nine.
06.
Here we go.
There we go. NPAC at its finest. Now, as we close, we always got to leave on an up note. So, as we talk about the verdict, as we talk about knees on the neck, let's inspire the people because the knees ultimately going to come up. I know it's been on our necks for a long time, but when it comes up, we want to keep the people empowered. Next moves, whatever is on your heart right now, go ahead, give it to them. The floor is yours. Dr. Deans first, David, and then Dr. Fries.
I guess my word for empowerment is always look for the opportunity. That was one thing that one of my previous supervisors I used to work with always talked about. There's opportunity even in crisis. So look for the opportunity. If it's an opportunity to speak, if it's an opportunity to empower, it's an opportunity to give somebody a hug, it's an opportunity to share your voice. If it's an opportunity to do something in spoken word, to write, to read, to pick up a piece of knowledge, to build a business from it. If it's, some people have built businesses off of one t-shirt, one slogan. So whatever the opportunity is and is there, take advantage of the opportunity because even in crisis, there is still opportunity.
I would say believe in yourself, and you're worth it, and you have worth and you have value, and if you don't feel like you do, start finding ways to speak life into yourself, because at the end of the day, when you need somebody in your corner, you're gonna have to be in your own corner, and you're gonna have to find a way to fight out and to fight up.
So I have a story, and then I'm gonna say what I want to say. So, and I don't know if anybody's heard this parable, but it's an Asian parable. I want to say, if you fact check me and I'm wrong, send a comment, we'll correct it. But I think it's an Asian parable, and it's a story of a farmer who had some sons and had one horse, and he was a farmer. And one day his horse ran away. And the neighbor said, "Oh my gosh, what bad fortune you have. Your horse ran away. How are you going to get your crops and stuff turned in?" And he said, "Who knows whether it's good or bad," and kind of left him perplexed with that. About 2 weeks later, the horse comes back with 11 other horses. So now the horse has 12 horses. The farmer has 12 horses. So the neighbors come back and like, "Oh wow, what good fortune. This horse came back with 12. Now you're able to do more work." And he said, who knows whether that's good or bad. A week later, his son is on the horse, and this horse bucks on one of those new horses. Horse bucks the son off the horse, bucks him off. Son breaks his leg. So the work production, and the mind the field, the man the field is low. So the neighbors come back, what did you do? This is bad luck on you. What did I? He says, who knows whether it's good or bad. About 3 weeks later, this country goes to war, and the generals are surrounding up all the males in the countryside to go to war. And they come to the guy's house and realize that the son's leg is broken, says he can't go to war, he'll stay here. And the neighborhood comes back and says, how lucky you are, your son. And he said, who knows whether it's good or bad. I say all that to say this. We're in a situation where, depending on your perspective, who knows whether it's good or bad. For the longest, we've had knees on our necks. And I will say, living here in Colorado, and then with our guests being from the South, I will say Louisiana. When you're used to having to breathe a limited amount of air, and then finally you're able to use the full effectiveness and efficiencies and capacities of your lungs, you realize that you are way more powerful, stronger, the ability to do things that you never thought you could do. So it's like me coming from Colorado down to Louisiana, where there's more air, oxygen in the air than in the altitude of Colorado. And so the proverbial knee on our neck is being lifted. And I'm encouraging people to recognize that who knows whether it's good or bad. These things that we've had to go through in history, this case, things like that. We know when we look at the short end of it, the immediate situation, we know it's bad. But long term, we're getting the knee off our neck. And we're able now to finally, hopefully, use the full capacity of our lungs and our abilities of our bodies to do great and powerful things that we've already learned how to do and adapt and be efficient with limited amount of oxygen coming into the body as it is currently. So be not discouraged, but encouraged by the renewing of your mind. Understand that you can always fulfill the capacity that's given to you and the gifts that's given to you. And don't ever think about it from the negative, but know that who knows whether it's good or bad.
That was good, Dr. Fries. So again, you've been listening to the Educate You podcast, brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. Follow us on all our social media outlets, on Instagram, TikTok, on YouTube. So again, Dr. Deams, thank you for all the wisdom. We're going to take all the stuff that you said. I hope it ain't copywritten because we're using it. Thank you.
I'm straight using it. I already gave credit on this podcast.
I was already writing it down.
Truly my pleasure. My pleasure. Truly my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Fellas, good show. Good show.